Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, Deshaun Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We've seen so many injuries to the Eagles this year, and it's kind of allowed some younger players to play, which isn't unusual. It happens every year with this team, but a couple of them have been particularly interesting. Michael Jacquet and Alex Singleton. These guys may have futures here.
Yeah, and you're kind of desperately looking for younger pieces on defense, and they might have found a couple, and it just kind of continues that practice squad development thing that we started with Greg Ward and Boston Scott and Fulgham, and I mean so many of these guys have become pieces to this whole thing. Jacquet, I don't think I've ever seen a receiver allow 169 or whatever it was yards in a game and feel like he played well. It was his first career start. He was matched up against a Hall of Famer, one of the very, very best receivers in the league, and he battled. He gave up some big plays when he had good coverage. He didn't back down. I saw enough good things from Michael Jacquet, and he played well in that Dallas game too. And a few weeks ago, he got 30 some odd snaps when Slay got hurt. I liked what I saw from him, and there's certainly a opening for a CB2 on this team next year.
There's been an opening for a CB2 for a long time here.
Yeah, and a CB1 a lot of years, but assuming Slay's back and healthy, he's been banged up this year a lot, but they could draft somebody. Certainly, I don't think anybody would be surprised if they took a corner early. Whether he's ready to play, I mean, who knows? Whether he makes the team, who knows at this point? But I think we all kind of agree that Avonte Maddox is not a full-time starting outside corner. I think there's a role for him, but he gets hurt all the time too. So I think Jacquet is pretty solid, and looking forward to seeing more of him.
I am too. I want to mention Ray Didinger will join us in just a little bit to talk about Jalen Hurts and that whole dynamic. We have to get everyone's take on it. We got Barrett's earlier in the week. We have to talk to Ray about it. We want to talk about the Eagles special teams. They have not been very good this year under Dave Phipp. And Kyler Murray was named the NFC Offensive Player of the Week, continuing a very troubling trend. So we'll get into all of that. But I like where we're starting with Michael Jacquet. An interesting guy out of Louisiana, actually went there as a wide receiver, didn't flip over to defense until they had a coaching change in 2018, flips to defense. He gets a couple years at corner, and then the draft comes. He doesn't get drafted. He's undrafted, but the Eagles paid him a lot of money. They liked him, and he has something that Jim Schwartz doesn't really seem to value at corner, but he has height. Or as Doug Peterson would say, he has height. And you ever notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird one, but he does. And we've seen, it's not completely necessary, but it helps, and you can't teach it. And Avonte Maddox doesn't have it.
Yeah, and he's also, he's pretty solid physically, and really aggressive kid. He's he goes out and battles from what we've seen in the game and a half he's played. But yeah, I think he's got a lot of tools, and I think these are valuable reps for him. I think he's got a chance to really have a significant role next year. They've run so many cornerbacks in and out of here over the last few years. I saw, Devontae Bosby getting beat the other night in that Broncos game. I was like, these names out of the past. Shandon Sullivan starting for the Packers. Obviously, Sidney and Rasul are both playing okay. But it's just been new faces after new faces. But I think they finally, and there was a point where I really liked Rasul, and I thought he had a chance to kind of be in that role, but it just didn't work out. But I do think Jacquet, and I love the nickname too, Full Metal Jacquet.
Is that his nickname?
I just made it his nickname.
Oh, okay.
Somebody threw that out there on Twitter.
I don't know if I like that.
Full Metal. Just call him Full Metal. But I like what I see, and I think he's got that mentality, and I think going up against an all-time great wide receiver can go two ways for a guy. I think you really see what he's made out of. Is he gonna he's gonna hang his head, and he never did. He just kept fighting and battling, and his confidence never wavered, and I think that's important.
It is. I'm not and it's probably unfair that I bring up Jacquet and Singleton, because Singleton, we've seen him now for a while, play at a pretty high level, whereas Jacquet, we've really seen him in 2 games. So probably unfair that I brought them up together, but they did both. They were practice squad guys who worked their way up. Singleton's a little further ahead on that track, but I like Jacquet. Look,
not old too. Singleton's 27.
Yeah, he's had a longer path to get here.
Yeah.
But with Jacquet, I'm not ready to say he's a starter, because I don't know if he'll ever be that. But this team needs depth. We've seen that at corner. I mean, they're gonna need more than 3 corners, because these guys get hurt at a crazy high rate, and I guess all defensive backs do around the league, but especially with this team. So having some quality depth, I don't think obviously it should stop them from drafting one if they want to, because I think they need high level corners. But I like what I've seen, and I think they're better off with them.
Yeah, I just think he should be in the mix next year. Obviously, if they draft a corner in the first round, he's going to be a starter, probably in the second round, if he doesn't blow out his Achilles. But I think there'll be a role for him on this team. I've seen enough to feel confident that he'll be here and he'll have a role. How big it is.
Singleton? I think Singleton's an even more interesting case, because a little body of work now he's been building. This is a guy who didn't have, he was a special teamer at the start of the season. He made the team this year. Last year he started on the practice squad. This year he made the team out of training camp, but really didn't play defense at all until injuries started to pile up. And now, he doesn't leave the field. I think he has double-digit tackles in 5 of 7 starts or whatever it is. Yep. He's playing at a really high level. He's quick. He's instinctive. He's gotten better in coverage, which is something all these linebackers have really struggled with. I don't know. They might have something there. I don't know if he's a Pro Bowler, but I think he's proven that he deserves to be on the field.
Well, Nate Gary's going to be healthy at some point, and what I like from Singleton is he's around the ball. You mentioned the word instinctive. I think it's a great word for him. He's and it's funny because this game is so different than the Canadian game, but he just seems to have a nose for the ball. He's one of those guys that just kind of is always in the right place. I think he's really consistent. I think the Packers game is probably the only bad game he played, and everybody, Aaron Rodgers will do that to linebackers too. But I really like the fact that he's just, every week he just kind of, he'll have a couple tackles for loss, a couple big plays every game, solid against the run. He's just a really solid guy. I remember talking about him at the end of last year, and we were trying to figure out what they had in him, and we just didn't know. And I was like, I'd like to at least find out, see him play some linebacker, because he's okay. He's pretty good on special teams. And generally with young linebackers, when you see him do well on special teams, you at least want to see him play linebacker a little bit. And he certainly wasn't being blocked by anybody, as far as, so you wonder why it took them so long to get him in the mix. It really took Nate Gary's injury to get Alex Singleton out there. And it's hard to imagine why. He's so much better than Nate Gary, but Jim will tell you he wasn't quite ready, which I guess I would say the same thing if I wasn't playing him. But he's a force. He's a different kind of player than they've, he's not the prototypical Jim Schwartz, super quick, fast, running across the field laterally, and he's not slow, but he's a bigger kind of linebacker. He's more of an old school, kind of just really solid against the run. Like you said, he has gotten better in coverage. He did have a pick 6. Dude threw the ball right to him, but I like his game. I don't see any real weaknesses in his game. I think they have something there. Yeah,
I could still say coverage is still a weakness comparative to other linebackers around the league.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a weakness. I think there's plays that he gets beat, but I think that's true for every linebacker. But I think he's gotten a lot better at it.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a low bar in this city based on what we've seen this year. I mean, but really since he's been in the lineup, it's been so much better. It really has been. And the Eagles loved them some Nate Gary, and I don't think anyone else ever really saw it, but inside the building, they really liked him. It's hard to imagine he'll be back next year.
It'd be interesting if they bring him back just to play special teams. He's not a bad special teamer.
Yeah, I don't know if they can help themselves if the same coaching staff is here, which is a question too. But they seem to really like Nate Gary. I don't know if they'd bring him back. If they bring him back, he's probably playing, which is I don't think ideal.
No, I agree. I agree with that. They're never going to make linebacker a priority, but you can still have guys out there who can at least belong on a football field, and Alex Singleton definitely does.
Yeah, I agree with that. You mentioned Nate Gary on special teams. They could use him on special teams because it has not been a good year. And really, Sunday, and we talked about it in the post-game pod, probably the worst special teams performance I've seen since Dave Phipp has been here. Who, there was a period of 2, 3, 4 years where Eagles had one of the best special teams units in the NFL. And it was something you never had to worry about. But there were, some huge – they probably win that game with a better effort on special teams.
Oh, sure. The block punt alone, was devastating. It's interesting, and this is Phipp's 8th year here, special teams coach. There's been a gradual – the last couple of years they weren't great. I thought of him as one of the best special teams coaches in the league at one point, maybe his first 4 or 5 years here. There's been a gradual decline. Now, I do think some of that might be related to just the number of injuries and guys coming and going on the roster, because those last guys on the roster are your special teams, the last guys that are up. And a lot of these guys are guys that just got here. So he's constantly juggling that. And I think you have to remember that. But really, every special teams coach is doing the same thing. You constantly have guys coming and going. Even during games, you're trying to all right, who's on kick coverage now? Because these two guys are out. All right, you get over here, even though you haven't practiced it. There's a lot of that going on, a lot of moving pieces, as a good friend of ours would say. So I think that part of it's not easy, but the overall product has gone down. And it's weird because special teams is like so many different things. If you're bad against the run, you're just bad against the run. You figure out why. Giving up, a first down on a fake punt and having a punt blocked and, all that, they're all different things. So it's
having a bad snap. Yeah.
Bad snap. That's on Rick Lovato. Is that Dave Phipp's fault? I don't know. He's responsible for the whole product, and overall the whole product has gone downhill, not just last week or this year, but really the last few years. So, I think we used to talk about Dave Phipp as maybe being a head coach at one point.
Yeah, that was definitely a conversation.
What's that?
Yeah, that was definitely a conversation point, early in the Doug years.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't think we're really having that conversation right now. So
no, this is interesting. This is so Rick Gosselin, longtime NFL columnist, does his annual special teams rankings. And I just want to go through these with you because it really kind of shows you what the eye test is showing too. Before Phipp got here, the Eagles were 28th in 2012. Then they were 19th in his first year. They were first in 2014, fifth in 2015, first in 2016, and now we've started to see this decline. 13th in 17, 14th in 18, 15th in 19, and I'd imagine that they'll be even lower in 2020. And
so they haven't been a top 10 unit since 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and I think you're right. I think there are multiple factors in this, and I think injury is a big one. And it's hard to evaluate that because, if your starters get hurt, then your top special teams players are your starters on offense or defense. Now you've got, here comes undrafted whoever in as your gunner, and all of a sudden your special teams look bad. And also, I don't think they have these top tier special teams players anymore. They used to keep spots for Brian Brayman and Chris Maragos and, these really high level special teams players. I guess they have that a little bit this year. I mean, but the guys they have been hurt. Like Rudy Ford and Craig James, they kept to be gunners, and they've both been hurt.
Yeah, so many of those guys have had to fight. I mean, Alex Singleton was one of those guys. Nate Carey was one of those guys. He's a pretty good special teamer. Sean Bradley, T.J. Edwards was a really good special teamer. Now, so I think they've lost a lot of those guys. I think that when you look at the decline that started in 17, that's when they started having a ton of injuries in the secondary and linebacker, and especially the last 3 years when that decline has continued. So there is a connection there, but still, you can't have a game like you did Sunday. I mean, that's the kind of game that gets special teams coaches fired.
And I give Phipps credit because he's been a little defensive this year. In some of these conference calls, but he owned it. I mean, that's the only thing he can do after a game like that. Yeah. Own it and say it can't happen, and we'll see. I tend to think he's a pretty good coach, but it's really hard to see it right now.
Yeah, and then you throw like Jake Elliott's issues in the mix, and Phipps not a kicking coach, and most teams don't have a kicking coach. These guys have their private personal kicking coaches, but there's been a decline in, even Cameron Johnson has not had the year he had last year. Maybe some of that's the weather, being an outdoor kicker. But Jake Elliott's declined. There've been issues fielding punts. Obviously, Rager had the big one. But, even Greg Ward, whose job is just to go back and secure the ball and get you 4 or 5 yards safely, he's had trouble judging the ball and when to pick it up and when to let it go. Field position's been a real problem when your offense is this bad and you're starting drives at the 18 and the 16 and that's a real issue. And basically that's what special teams is, field position. That's what it is. It's it's essentially just trying to give the defense a long field and trying to give the offense a short field, and they've struggled doing both of those things.
Yeah, they have, and we'll see what happens. But we've talked about job security for a lot of people, and I think you have to. It's never fun to talk about job security for especially assistant coaches, but yeah, I think you have to start to question it a little bit.
Yeah, there's going to be changes. Doug makes changes on his coaching staff every year, and even when they win a Super Bowl, there's changes on the coaching staff. So, assuming Doug is here, who knows? There's going to be changes, and I think and I like David. He's a good guy. I sat next to him on the flight out to the combine one year, out to Indianapolis, and we just sat there and talked about our families and growing up and playing youth sports and stuff. We had a great time, and you get to know a guy like that, personally like that, and then you sit there on a podcast talking about this guy's getting fired. It's like I don't take a lot of pleasure in that, but I think it's certainly certainly on the table there. No doubt. Hey, 'tis the season to thrill at the Nissan year-end sales event. Get in and get out and experience the most riveting ride of the year in a brand new Nissan. These savings on Nissan's lineup are sure to raise your pulse.
Joining us now on the Eagle Eye podcast, as he does every week, our good friend Ray Didinger. Ray, how you doing?
I'm good, David. How are you this holiday week?
We're doing well. I'm feeling jolly. I know Reuben is too. Look at him. He's how jolly.
I probably wouldn't use that particular word.
I like jolly. Well, it's funny because Ray, last week we had talked about Jalen Hurts' first start, and he did some impressive things, but we hadn't seen enough, I don't think. But last week, even more impressive. What did you think of him?
Really impressive. I'm always a guy that tries not to go too far overboard on things. I try to be a little more measured, but it was hard not to be excited because it was, the first week he was really good, but the second week, last week, it was, even though in a losing effort, I thought the way he played in the pocket was really impressive. The throws that he made, really impressive. The first week, he did a lot of stuff with his legs, scrambling around, stuff we kind of already knew that he could do. But I thought this week because of the circumstances, because they fell behind 16-0 so early and were kind of playing catch up all day, he kind of had to become a pocket, throw the ball down the field kind of quarterback. And boy, he was much better at it really than I expected. He made some great throws and looked real comfortable in the pocket. And even though the protection kind of gave out and he wound up taking some sacks, I thought his overall performance was really, really good. And I can see why people were excited. And on the post-game show, Michael Barkan was over the moon about him, but it wasn't alone. I think a lot of people were. And it was just nice to have something out there in this Eagle season that people could get excited about. And they genuinely were, and I understood why. He was really, really good.
Ray, we lived through Bobby Hoying in 97. He had the game against the Bengals and a couple good games at the end of that year. Ty Detmer was unstoppable his first few starts. He wasn't a rookie, but Bobby was in his second year. AJ Feely had put together like three or four really good starts when he replaced Donovan when he was hurt. So we've seen these guys, play really well in their first few starts and obviously not sustain it. What do you look for in a young quarterback that maybe gives you an indication it's who he is and it's not just a fluke?
Yeah. I think exactly the same thing, because when you've been covering the team as long as we have, you've seen this play out before. It's not like the first time. And sometimes it does prove to be, to use the term, fool's gold. You mentioned the guys you mentioned, absolutely true. I mean, I thought of AJ Feely right away. The other one I thought about was Kevin Kolb. You remember Kevin Kolb's first two games? He threw for 300 yards and 300 yards. It was the first time in NFL history that a quarterback threw for over 300 yards in his first two games. And everybody said, oh, man, what have we found here? And then, we found out the truth of Kevin Kolb over time. And that's the National Football League. I mean, all of this stuff is decided over time. But there seems to be something about Hurts that makes you feel like he has some staying power here. I'm not prepared to say that the whole quarterback situation is resolved and he is indeed the quarterback of the future. But if you look back over his career and you look at the schools that he played, the programs he played in, the games that he won, the stages on which he's performed, this is not an out of nowhere kind of guy. I mean, he's a guy that has real pedigree. And the fact that he came in here and hit the ground running and has performed with such total assurance, and the way clearly it's obvious to everyone the way the players have rallied behind him. There's something about this that feels kind of real. Now, we don't know, and I hesitate to jump way ahead and say, well, this settles it for the quarterback situation. All the questions are answered. It is 2 games, but it's been a very impressive 2 games, and I think that I'll say this: he's way further ahead than I expected him to be, given what I saw of him in college. And I liked him in college, I did, but I didn't think as a passer that he would be nearly as far along as he is right now. The poise, the ability to lead the team, his ability to run, certainly. I mean, we knew he had that, but I questioned whether he could actually function in the pocket as a down the field passer. But man, he looked pretty good doing it on Sunday. And and these were 2 pretty good teams that he beat. Now, I mean, the Saints are certainly a playoff team and had the number 1 defense in the league. And I think the Arizona Cardinals appear like they're well on their way to the playoffs. So it isn't like he went in against 2 tomato cans. I mean, these were 2 teams, good teams that were playing for the postseason, and he performed really well. I'm not, I understand the excitement. I mean, I'm not prepared to say that this is all a done deal and that he's going to go on to greatness. But you have to be impressed by what you've seen. I know I certainly am.
Right. In the last couple podcasts, Reuben and I have talked about this, but I want to get your take on it. The Eagles they're going to have such a major decision to make. I mean, franchise-altering decision. And we've kind of laid out this nightmare scenario where they make the wrong one. And, if they decide Hurts is their guy and they trade Carson and he goes to Indianapolis or New England, wherever he goes, and he has an MVP year, or they make the decision, they stick with Carson, they they kind of ship Hurts away, and he goes on to have an incredible career. I mean, of those two scenarios, what do you think is more likely?
I still think that there's a very good chance that they're both here next year. I really do. I know everybody has got. Look, I don't think there's any case. I don't see any scenario in which Hurts is not. I think he's back, and kind of based on what you've seen, I think he needs to be back because there's a lot of promise there. But I don't know. I mean, I look at the contractual situation that they find themselves in with Wentz. It's going to be very hard to move him, I think. And I don't know if you're trading him at this point, if you're going to get his real value back in return. I was saying on the show last Sunday that I think that the more likely scenario is that they're both here next training camp, and that it's just competition, that you just let them go out and compete for the job. Because I know that there's been a real rush to judgment on Wentz, and there seems to be this almost conventional wisdom now that he's done, he's finished, that he can't play anymore, certainly can't play here, and you just have to move on from him. I'm not sure I'm quite there yet, and I've heard some people say, well, a guy in his situation, once they lose it, they never get it back. Well, we could sit here all day and cite examples of guys that are in that situation. I mean, just as right now, I mean, you look at Ryan Tannehill, the people in Miami, they couldn't, that draft pick, that was a bust. Let's get him out of here. He goes to Tennessee and he's playing great. So I still feel that Carson Wentz has a lot of ability, and I think that he can still play and win games in the NFL. I'd rather see him doing it here in Philadelphia than doing it in Indianapolis, even though I like Frank Reich and I want to see him succeed. Very fine fellow. But if Carson Wentz is going to win games in the NFL, I'd rather see him win them here than in Indianapolis.
Which brings us, of course, to the situation where you'd have both quarterbacks in the same locker room, on the same field. Do you think it's a tenable situation? Because it's the quarterback position is such a unique situation, such a unique position that I think players in the locker room kind of gravitate toward one or the other. Can you sustain that in a season, having both quarterbacks here?
I've seen it work both ways. I mean, I look at it the other way. I think the NFL is all about competition, and I think competition makes people better. And I mean, I don't know the inner workings of Carson Wentz, is what's going on inside his head exactly. But he strikes me as a hyper competitive sort of person. And after what happened this year, and everything that's been said about him, I know that he's going to work really hard this offseason. If the Eagles hold on to him and it becomes what I think it could very well become, which is the two of them coming back and fighting for the job, I fully expect him to come back more motivated and really good, and coming back with the idea that, I'm still the guy here. I still know I can win games, and I'm going to prove to everybody that I can do that. And I know the competition is going to be fierce because I know this other guy is really good, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to compete for the job. If that were to happen, I think it would make Wentz better. I think you'd get the best out of Wentz, and I think it would push Hurts too. I think that rather than just break the thing up, move on from Wentz, turn the job over to Hurts, and then go shopping for another backup quarterback. If the thing works out that they both come back, I think it could actually be positive because I think you'll get the best out of both guys. As far as the dividing the locker room thing, well, yeah, I have seen that happen. And I think some of the veteran guys will, and you've already heard some of them speak up to you guys in press conferences, how they defend Carson all the time, the older guys. The younger guys would probably naturally gravitate towards Hurts, but it doesn't necessarily have to divide the team. If out of that comes one quarterback who can win for you on Sunday, then that will pull everybody back together again. I mean, you'll never see a locker room, you'll never see a quarterback dynamic that was more poisonous than Joe Montana and Steve Young. that was a situation where the two of them wouldn't even look at each other. But it didn't stop the 49ers from winning multiple Super Bowls. So it can work. I mean, it can be. Is there a danger to it? You're right, there is. But I've seen it work, and I just think that my feel is I think Wentz is enough of a competitor that what he went through this year will just drive him into an off season where he's just going to come back next year ready to compete, ready to play, and I think it'll make both guys better in the long run.
I will say that I don't think all the older guys would gravitate to Carson, but that's a story for another day. I know one of them who would gravitate toward Hurts, but I think it is a difficult situation, and that's why it's such a tricky dynamic, because I don't think it's the healthiest thing to have Jalen and Carson. I think it's different if you have Carson and Nick, that are kind of the same age and best friends. Jalen Hurts and Carson, and part of this is probably the pandemic and not being able to hang out and stuff, but they don't seem particularly close. Carson's 5 years older. I don't know how healthy a dynamic that would be to have them together. But again, like Dave said, if you move on from one of them, now you have the nightmare scenario of making the wrong pick. So having the two of them remain here might be the evil of two lessers, as they say.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you guys this: what is the financial ramifications of parting ways with Wentz? I mean, in terms of the cap hit, and we already know the salary cap situation that this team is facing next year anyway. I mean, what would be the feasibility of doing that? I mean, could they do it? It's
not really prohibitive. I mean, the dead money would be about the same, within $800,000, I think, of his cap figure if he stayed here. It would be a record amount of dead money. There's never been 30. What would it be, Dave? 33.8 million dead money.
Yeah.
And his cap figure is like 34 million. So those two numbers are the same. Whether he's here or not, he's going to count the same against the cap. As long as you don't, and their quarterback cap figure is going to be about the same, because Hurts' cap figure is really low, and whoever the other QB is would be really low as well. So I don't think it's prohibitive from that point. Financially, it would be embarrassing, and it would be, but I mean, you're already like in it's not going to prohibit you from bringing other guys in. You probably wouldn't be able to do that anyway to a great extent. I think the real issue to me is compensation, because I don't think you're getting a first-round pick for him.
No way.
I think you might be able to get a 2 and something else. But you're talking about a guy that was the second pick in the draft in 2016, and now maybe you're getting a 2 and a 4 or a 2 and a 5 for him. I don't think that's ideal, but if they're determined to cut their losses, they can do it. I think they could get a 2 for him.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically doing it to get rid of the future year of cap space. But, I mean, they're almost in a situation where, sure, they'll get a draft pick or 2, but they're basically paying Carson Wentz, when you look at the cap, to not play here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one of the things that really bothers me about the way this thing is unfolding is just the way people are just piling on Carson Wentz now. I mean, if you go into any of the national TV shows, be they ESPN, be they NFL Network, the panel type of shows, I mean, it's just everybody's just having a field day, just pounding on Carson Wentz. And frankly, I don't know what he's done to deserve it. I mean, I've seen, like Ryan Clark is saying he was never a Philly guy. Well, what does Ryan Clark know about what's a Philly guy? Rex Ryan saying he's soft, he's got no heart. Rex Ryan may have never met Carson Wentz in his life, but there's this.
He did. He interviewed him in London.
Huh?
He interviewed him after practice in London.
Well, there's just all of this. Everybody's now rushing to kick this guy while he's down, and that bothers me, and the other narrative that's in Philadelphia now, which I'm hearing all the time, is after 2017 he was never any good anyway, which is not true. I mean, if you look at his numbers in 18 and 19, they weren't bad. He wasn't what he was in 17, but he wasn't awful. But now it's sort of like, he had the one good year, but he's never been any good since then. Well, you did get to the playoffs with him twice. So this idea that, I always worry when everybody's in a hurry to throw somebody overboard and move on to the next guy, because very often it turns out to be the wrong thing to do. And I still think there's something worth saving and salvaging in Wentz. I still believe that. At his age now, I still think he can play. This has been a horrible year. There's no doubt about that. And he's played every bit of what his statistics tell you he's played. He's played poorly. But I don't believe it's over for him. The question that you guys bring up, it's a valid concern. I mean, can those two guys coexist in this situation? Could it be damaging? Could be. I try to look at it from the other side, that I think the competition might be good for both of them. Just say, hey, listen, guys, just go out there. There's the football. There's the job. May the best man win. And I think you might wind up getting the best out of both those guys.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be fascinating because this story not going away. We're going to be talking about it for the next few months, and I'm sure we'll talk to it.
It's going to be dominating. It's going to be dominating the entire conversation in the off season. And there's going to be so many questions, regardless of what happens in the last two games. So many questions that have to be asked about the quarterback, the coach, and the general manager. This is going to be one of those off seasons where, nobody's going to be able to catch their breath. The off season is going to be more eventful than the season itself.
Yeah, you're probably right. Before we let you go, Ray, we had a fun little game for you. The Eagles had 3 Pro Bowlers this year. Their 3 oldest starters. So we were trying to look at their roster and figure out if they have any future Pro Bowlers here that haven't made it yet. When you look at the roster, are there any young players you can kind of say they have the best shot to be that level player?
Sanders for sure. I think he's a star. I think he's almost that now. But assuming he can stay reasonably healthy, and at that position, that's always a concern. But I think he has certainly that level of ability. And other than that, Goddard possibly. I think Goddard possibly. I think he's very talented. Those would be the 2 guys. I would.
During that pause, Ray, if Howie Roseman was listening, he was holding his breath, like, say someone, Ray. Please say someone.
I was actually. Well, no, it's just way too much of a stretch. But I'm telling you, I really like what I've seen of Jordan Mailata. I'm not saying, I don't want to put him in the Pro Bowl because that is, I'm going pretty far afield there. But I really do think that he has a chance to be a really good player. I think he has a chance to really be your left tackle of the future. And I don't know what that says for Andre Dillard, but I really like the way this guy plays. I like the way he competes. He's tough. When you look at how far he's come in the time that he's been here, and you assume that he's going to continue to improve, I think they really found something with him, but I'm not prepared to put him in the Pro Bowl yet. If you ask me, I really do feel comfortable in saying Sanders, and I think Goddard is a kid that is the more he plays, the better he's going to get. So I would say those 2.
Well, we thank you, and I'm sure Howie thanks you as well. Ray, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We'll talk again next week.
Merry Christmas to you guys. Happy holidays and enjoy. Take care, fellas.
Thanks, Ray. Hey, if you're a football fan, you need to check out the new game Sunday Night 7 on the NBC Sports Predictor app. There's really no reason not to play. It's totally free, and it's got $2 million in guaranteed cash prizes this year with $100,000 up for grabs every week. All you have to do is make 7 predictions about what's going to happen on Sunday Night Football for your chance to win some serious money. Download the NBC Sports Predictor app or head to NBCSports.com/predictor to make your Sunday Night 7 picks.
Thanks, as always, to Ray Didinger for joining us. Rube, I've never seen this before. Kyler Murray named the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. He is the 7th player after facing the Eagles to be given one of these awards, offensive or defensive. That means in 7 of their 9 losses, they've had an award-winning player on the other side.
Yeah, they bring out the best in people. There's no doubt about it. And some of them, Olivier Vernon, some of these guys didn't do much the rest of the year, but, they just had these incredible games, against the Eagles. That's not bad. And their net player of the week is -7 because they haven't had any. So they're -7. It's like turnover ratios, player of the week ratio. In fact, they haven't had an offensive player of the week since Boston Scott against the Giants last year. They haven't had a defensive since Fletcher in 2018. They really haven't had a player have 3 sacks or 2 interceptions, or, they haven't had a defensive player have a great game in a long time. They had good games, a couple sacks, but they haven't had those incredible performances. I mean, gosh, we saw Kirk Coleman have 3 interceptions in a game once. So they haven't had that. Before Fletcher, their last player of the week was Nick Foles. So it's been a while. Carson got a couple in 17, but they are -7 in players of the week. I wonder if that's ever happened before, where a team's been -7.
I'll tell you what, I don't want to look it up. That is not a job for me. But it's been incredible. And I don't know what it really means, but it seems like guys have career days against the Eagles, and it seems like it happens quite often.
Yeah, it's happened too much. And they've played 14 games and they've had an opposing player of the week in half of them. So that's not ideal. 3 of them are AFC players of the week, interestingly, 4 NFC.
Yeah, they're equal opportunity. Yeah, it's not great.
What's the best performance against the Eagles this year?
I don't know. Out of these 7, probably Chase Claypool.
Yeah,
in week 5, because he had touchdowns both ways, receiving and rushing. Micah Kaiser, that's the best game of his career. Yeah. That was his second career start, and he had 15 tackles. So one of those 2. At least with Ryan Kerrigan, you're all right, he's done this before.
Aaron Rodgers done it before a couple times.
Yeah, those guys are, what are you going to do with them? But with Micah Kaiser, second career start, you can't let him go off like that.
Olivier Vernon, that was all JP. I can't say what he was doing all over himself, but it wasn't pretty.
And Calais Campbell was the Jamon Brown game, so you give Jamon a little assist on that.
Where's he now? What do you think he's doing today?
He's on the Eagles practice. Oh, no, he's not. He's got cut. That's right. I don't know what he's doing. He's putting on his gloves somewhere. It's cold out.
What else you got?
Last thing, what's your favorite Christmas song? I just want to know before we wrap it up.
My favorite Christmas song is Fairy Tale of New York by the Pogues. Maybe the best song ever written. I watched a documentary on the making of that song.
The best song ever written?
Yeah, really? I believe it is. Fairy Tale of New York. I don't think there's ever been a better song written. I'm partial to Father Christmas by the Kinks, which I saw them perform live in 1978 at the Westchester Premier Theater in New York, Tarrytown, New York. And Psychedelic Santa by Buzz Eimer is a great little pop song. It's a good one. I love the Beach Boys Christmas song. Little Saint Nick is a good one too. But Fairy Tale of New York will always be at the top of that list.
Okay, fair enough. I'm a big, ever hear of Merry Christmas Baby by Otis Redding?
I don't think I've heard that one.
It's a good one. Check it out. You might like it. If not, I don't care. We want to thank Ray Didinger for joining us as always. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, as always, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We'll be back with you after the game on Sunday. For Reuben, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you soon.